most of our crew. We had a really large crew this morning, so I want to welcome everyone back to Asterisk 123 at AstriCon 2013. So I'm happy that you've decided to join us here for our next session. And this is a cool room here that I am excited. I've been able to chat a little bit with a few folks, and so I know that there's a lot of developers in the room, and that's exciting. And especially because Asterisk 12 is really made for developers. It has some great features like the RESTful interface I was talking about. That's going to be good for you guys. I do certainly want to encourage you to hang out in the room. I would love for you to be here all day and invite your friends and hang out here for Asterisk 123. That would be great, but I do want to call your attention to some of the sessions next door. And so if you were interested in, say, partnering with Digium, and so as I mentioned, Digium sells a whole series of products and services based around and supporting Asterisk. And if you think to yourself, I would like to partner with Digium and maybe be a Digium reseller or a Digium partner, there's a talk going on next door right before lunch, why partner with Digium. So I would encourage you to attend that talk. In addition, this afternoon, here in Asterisk 123, I'll be giving a very basic talk regarding connecting endpoints. But if you wanted a more advanced talk, next door, Malcolm, who's our product manager, he'll be giving a very in-depth talk on some of the new features in the very new version of our phone firmware, version 1.4, which includes Smart BLF. And so there's a lot of really cool things you can do with Smart BLF. I'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one, but Malcolm will be doing a full-on demo next door, and we'll have that functionality in the Digium booth. Additionally, since we have so many developers, our phones have a JavaScript API. And so if you are interested in custom app development, custom endpoint development for phones, one of our developers, Sean Ruffle, will be giving a talk next door this afternoon on custom app development. So I'll remind you folks about that. Again, interested in partnering with Digium, our Jim Butler, who's our Director of Channel Sales, will be doing that next door. And if you're hanging out here, we will continue with our Asterisk 123 session. So my name is Billy Chia. I'm the Asterisk Marketing Manager at Digium. Here's some of my contact info, so please hit me up on Twitter and LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you folks. Send me an email. And again, I really love to hear folks' stories and how you're using Asterisk and just what you're doing in your location. Feel free to connect with me. In this session, we will go from 11 until about noon, and then we will break for lunch. And so in this session, we'll talk about some of the ways that we can install Asterisk and do a little bit of an introduction there to the Dialplan. So just for comparison's sake, I'll pop up here our AstriCon website, and you can view the schedule here side by side. So here's Tuesday's schedule, and here while we're installing Asterisk into the Dialplan, they're talking wrapping services around SwitchVox and why partner with Digium. And then, like I said this afternoon, these are some nice sessions to be able to hit. And for those of you that are using distributions like FreePBX or Elastics, again, feel free to hang out with me this afternoon for Advanced Dialplan, where, like I said, by the end of the day, we'll have some nice scripting. Even if you've never done, so you're probably in a room and you're thinking, I'm in a room of 100 people and 80 other people in here are like C developers, and I've never written a line of code before. Well, by the end of the day, you'll know how to write several lines of code. We'll even go into some advanced Dialplan, or you can hang out next door for the Elastics and FreePBX sessions. So talking about some of those exciting things there. So installing Asterisk. There are several ways to install Asterisk, and predominantly you will be able to compile Asterisk from source to get Asterisk as part of a repository, or to get Asterisk as part of a distribution. And this is basically assuming you want to run Asterisk or an Asterisk-based distribution. Of course, you could get Asterisk as part of a product that you would then install that product, like say Switchvox or some other type of fully built product. But these are the ways that you would get just Asterisk as a project. So maybe I can show some live action here. So this is our Asterisk website. And if I wanted to download the source code, I can go to asterisk.org and click right here on the downloads. And here I'm able to, I have several options. So I can download the communications framework, which is just the Asterisk code itself, that toolkit that I can then build things on top of. Or I could download the Asterisk Now distribution, which is like a actual built PBX that you would then click in with a GUI. So this is kind of like the command line and comp files. This one is with a GUI built on top, and this one's got like, a 32-bit or 64-bit version. But you can download that source code from asterisk.org and then compile the code. And what that allows you to do is, like I said earlier, let me do this. So if I go to cd user source, what do I have in here? OK, let's go to certified asterisk 11. So here's my source directory. So effectively, what I've done on this machine that I'm logged into is I've downloaded the tarball from asterisk.org. I went to asterisk.org and I downloaded. And then I untarred the file here. And if you're not familiar with Linux, a tar file is kind of like a zip file in Windows. And so the way you would unzip a compressed file, you would untar the file. And I wonder if I even have it up here to show. I don't. Yeah, I have a Residium phone tar file. So you just do tar zxvf is a command. And tar. And so if I issue this command, I can probably issue it now. And then it would uncompress those files. So it would be the same thing for an asterisk tar, what we call a tarball, right? So then I can descend into this certified directory. So I untarred the Residium phone, but I'm actually talking about Asterisk. So just to not confuse anybody who's not familiar with this, those are two different things. So Asterisk would come as a tarball from asterisk.org. In any case, here is the source code. So when I was talking about open source, this is where it's very exciting. So for example, I wonder what's a good directory. I could go here into the channels directory. And here's the actual code. So if we go into chansip.c, my bad. So here it is. Here is the actual functions and such. So if you're a C coder, you're like, oh, OK, they're including some kind of asterisk header. And we've set up some other includes. And here we set up a couple static ints, right? And then we get into our functions as we get on down. So anyway, the point is, here's the actual code. You want to know how it works? You can actually go and look at it. It's pretty awesome. So asterisk is written in C, and that's what you can see there. And so when you compile asterisk, it's actually going to take that C code and compile it. And there's several commands that you would run on a box, actually. User source to do that. And I won't go through the whole compilation process now. There's several great tutorials. If you Google like installing Asterisk 11, there's a video we have on our blog. There's tutorials on asterisk.org. So I won't go through the whole process, but I do want to point out a tool that you can use, and that is the menu select tool. So during the compilation process, there's several steps to it, but one of them is to make menu select. So depending on how my terminal is here, and awesome, it works. Sometimes if the window's not large enough, right, you need like 80 characters wide or however it's structured. But in any case, this is the menu select tool. And this is where I was talking about in the last session that will allow you to select which modules you want to build. So a point of confusion, perhaps. How many folks, I realize I've been doing lots of polls in here, but it's just kind of good to know where you guys are at. How many folks have been using Asterisk since, say, like 1.2 or before? OK? So lots of folks have been using Asterisk for a long time. How about, say, 1.4? Started using Asterisk with 1.4? How about started using Asterisk with 1.8? And how about started using Asterisk a version after 1.8, like 10, 11? OK, so and some newer folks too. So this is exciting, folks who've been around a long time and some new folks in. Previously in Asterisk, so versions 1.6.2 and earlier had something called the Asterisk add-ons. And so the reason that we had an add-ons package was because of the licensing. So for example, MySQL, you can't package it up and license it out. And so we had it as a separate package to Asterisk. You had to download these two packages. Well, now you no longer need to deal with the add-ons thing. If you're using version 1.8 or later, the add-ons is built right into the menu select tool. So here you can see I can select, format MP3 or app MySQL or CDR or res config MySQL. And the way that it does that in a licensable fashion is it actually doesn't package that. It goes out to a distribution of that. And so that's all we're doing is we're going out and pulling a distribution. And that's a way to get it all in a nice, neat package. But additionally, you could select several things. So for example, let's say we're talking about our channel drivers. Here I see I've got chan eeks and chan sip. Now there's a few things here on the screen that I want to go through. The first is that these ones up here are what are called core modules. And core modules are supported by a Digium support contract. So if you have a Digium support contract, it supports those core modules. Digium core modules are also community supported, or I should say, supported by the development team first by the Digium development team, right? So Digium has a large team of developers that they just work on Asterisk. And so when you submit a bug into Asterisk on the bug website, so if you go to issues.asterisk.org, and while we're talking about it, might as well show that, issues.asterisk.org. How many folks in the room have a login for issues.asterisk.org? OK, by the end of the day, get on your mobile phone, get on your laptop. Everybody in the room should have a login for issues.asterisk.org. So that you can log in and submit bugs, right? And so on, let's show a few other resources, wiki.asterisk.org. On wiki.asterisk.org is the wiki documentation. And on the wiki, there's a very nice illustrative file. And we'll see how my Wi-Fi does here. May or may not pop up for me. But there's a very nice file on the wiki that will walk you through the steps of what's everything you need to know in order to submit a good bug, and then you can submit a bug. So what type of information you're looking for. And so bugs that get submitted, if they're core bugs, if they're bugs in core modules, those ones get fixed first, right? Those ones have the highest priority. Those are the ones that the Digium development team, they're going to go after those ones first. And the reason being is because this is the stuff that the most people use, right? So if there's a bug in chan eeks, there's so many people using that, they want to make that a core module, and they want to get that bug fixed first because so many people are reliant upon it for their business, right? On the other hand, if it's a community contributed module, so let's say you built your own custom C module, and it was something that you thought other people could use. Well, you can contribute that back to the community, which would be awesome because you got Asterisk for free. And so you did some development work, and then you can give it back so that other people can use that stuff, right? That would be great, but then the question kind of arises, well, if there's a bug in that module, who curates and takes care of that? And so if it's a not core module, then it's an extended module. And extended modules are community support. So for example, here we have Chan Skinny. So Chan Skinny actually is an implementation of Cisco's SCC protocol. If you have a Cisco phone that speaks SCCP, you can actually connect it to Asterisk and use that protocol. Now, that's not a core module, right? So if there's bugs in that module, it's not core supported. The Digium development team doesn't go after those bugs. The core developers of Asterisk that are non-Digium don't go after those bugs. the people responsible would be the ones who developed that module, right? So it's kind of like write your module, and then it's community supported. So you could put a bounty on it, or it's community supported. But we kind of do this split, like I said, so that the bugs get fixed in the things that the most people use. And that kind of makes sense, but that's the difference between core and extended. As a case in point, I'm using certified asterisk, and all certified asterisk is it's basically it's regular asterisk, and we just run it through some certification processes. And so for Digium, for our SLA customers, so we have service level agreement, level 5 support that you can actually get an SLA from Digium on your asterisk implementation. We only do that on the core modules, and so that's why when you install certified asterisk, it only installs the core modules. You can go in and install non-core modules, but it's just the ones that are selected by default. So this is a difference between asterisk and certified asterisk. So if you're downloading vanilla asterisk, all of these boxes will be checked. I believe still today, the default behavior of asterisk is if you have the dependencies for it, it will compile it. So when you boot up menu select, if you have what you need to make that module, asterisk is just going to, the menu select tool is just going to go ahead and say, yes, go ahead and build everything. And you have to go and unselect stuff. If you're using certified asterisk, one of the things it does is it only selects the core modules, and then you have to go and explicitly select the ones that you, so if I want Chan OSS or MGCP, or for example, let's say I did want to use that Chan Skinny. I can use it. I can get community support for it. I can fix it myself since it's open source. I can put a bounty on it. But I'm certainly welcome to use it with certified asterisk. And so you can see I've selected there. So this means build this module. This means don't build the module, right? How about the X's? What does it mean if I have X's? I don't have the dependencies. And what's really nice about this tool is that it actually will tell me what it's dependent upon in order for me to build that. So I wonder if we have, say, Chan Jingle, Chan Motif. OK, so Chan Motif, which is a core module, and this is kind of how you would speak to Google Voice using Chan Motif. But it's got some dependencies here, like Ixkismil. Does anybody have any better way to pronounce that? Nope. And resxmpp, right? So you're going to want resmpp. That's a resource module in asterisk. And of course, OpenSSL. So these are the dependencies you need that you would need to resolve first. And once you resolve those dependencies, then you can build the module, right? And to resolve Linux dependencies, you typically would do this through some kind of package manager. So I'm on a Red Hat-based system, so I would use the Yum package manager. So I would do, first, so maybe I can even walk you guys through this. I wonder if this is even going to work for me. And actually, exit out of here. Discard changes, exit. Let me see if I do yum search. Not going to happen. I do not have my VM connected to the public internet, so it's on its own little private network. So I was going to do a yum search, and I was going to search the repository. But you can do a yum search, and it's going to show you the various packages that pop up. Yeah, I don't have something I can log in to show it now. But maybe I'll show it later on if I can get something to log into. But basically, you can do yum search on a name. It'll show you those packages. And then you can do yum install if you're using yum. If you're using, say, Debian, you would use like apt-get. That's kind of what that means there. So the menu select tool here, that's what's going on with the X's here. So the other place that you could look to see what those dependencies are is in the source code, right? So you could either download the source code, or let's see how good this works. You go to svn.asterisk.org. I don't have permissions on the server, which is, oh yeah, right on. So asterisk is currently stored in Subversion, and so if you guys have used revision management or like a software, probably most of us use Git these days, and I know that there is a movement front to get asterisk onto Git. We actually do have a github.com/asterisk. And the Dottie. So you can actually get Dottie from GitHub. Here's the fork of PJ project that we use for Asterisk 12. Here is the StarPy library. And the StarPy is used in our test suite. And so if you're interested in testing Asterisk, where you could download a new versions of Asterisk or very new stuff, and then you wanted to run our test suite against it and to help test Asterisk, we have some of that documentation available, and that uses StarPy as the framework with AMI and FastAGI to do that. So, and there's some other tools here. Some Asterisk REST libraries, which is kind of cool. So, for example, here is say the Python library for the new REST interface, right? So you guys all kind of know when you're using a RESTful interface or most development software, you don't go and write all of your methods. You go and write some helper functions, or you use a library where somebody else has already written your helper functions, right? So that's what this library is here on the GitHub. The other GitHub I'll show you is github.com/Digium. So here is where there are some Digium apps. And so if you're interested in phone app development, there's a bunch of sample apps and code and a little screen tool that was written by somebody. I don't know who, but somebody wrote this, and they put it in the GitHub. In any case, there's some projects that use Git. Most of the Asterisk code uses Subversion. So you can actually go to svn.asterisk.org/svn, and you can look at the source code online, which is pretty nice. So for example, what were we looking at? Chan motif. If we go and do Asterisk, and let's go to a branch of Asterisk. Let's say Asterisk 12, which is our newest alpha version. And let's go to channels and motif. And if we look at chanmotif.c, we can see right here at the top of the file, it tells me in the source code that same information. So you can get to it in both of those ways. You could, or if you're using Subversion, you could do like a SVN checkout. You can check out the source code. You can download the tarball, different ways to get the source code. But in any case, so it's telling you here what its dependencies are, and that's the same thing. That's what it's pulling from to create this. So there's two ways to get at it there. And of course, the whole thing what this does is this tool lets you build specifically which modules you actually want to build. So you could go ahead and just build everything and then no load what you don't need, but you're not necessarily going to get everything. So for example, with the dependencies I have on my box, I can't build Chan motif. So this is going to let you go in and actually build everything that you need for your functionality, and it's going to let you go in and explore what's available. So for example, what types of codecs are available in Asterisk, or what types of Dialplan functions, that sort of thing. This is a nice tool to browse, to just familiarize yourself with what's available in Asterisk. And let's see here. So as I mentioned, you can get it from a tarval, or you can get it from Subversion. You can view the Subversion online, or more commonly, you can use the command line Subversion tools, or a GUI. Is anyone using Subversion via like some kind of GUI? Okay, I was just like to ask. Oh yeah, okay. So I know that there's a Mac. What did you guys use? You guys use Taurus, and what is that for Mac or PC? That's for Windows. Okay. Yeah, well, I guess if I had a Windows machine, then I probably would want some kind of GUI Subversion client. You'd have a whole other set of problems if you had a Windows machine. That's great. I would have a whole other set of problems. I would have a whole other set of problems if I had a Windows machine. That's terrific. So, in any case, you could install Asterisk not just from the source code. So you can compile it from source. And compiling it from source is the most flexible option, right? So as I've shown, it lets you custom select which modules you want to build. You can build modules that don't build by default. You can tailor make your system. If you are, if you're tuning your system, I would go ahead and encourage you to perhaps build modules. But I guess it depends on your thing. So if you have like a DevOps environment and maybe you're spinning up a lot of systems, you probably don't want to build stuff you don't need because that takes extra time to compile, right? So you can shorten your compile time by building less stuff, right? But if you're just going for a regular Asterisk system or your development system, or maybe even your production system, you could just go ahead and build stuff and then use modules.conf to no-load the things that you don't need. So that way, it's already there for you the next time you want to go and use it, right? That's the most flexible way. So still with some flexibility to it, but a little bit less flexible, is to get Asterisk from a repository. So you could use yum install Asterisk if you enable certain repos. There are repositories for Red Hat-based installs and for Debian-based installs. So you can just go ahead and use the package. And a lot of people use the package. Does anybody here predominantly, or I should say, has anybody in here used the repos to get Asterisk? OK, so we have a few folks. Is anybody using that as like that's their predominant method? You predominantly use it through the repo. OK, can I ask, what's appealing or what do you like about the repo? It's kind of ease of use. Yeah, OK. So the repo is really nice because you don't have to worry about compiling. It's no muss, no fuss, right? So for ease of use, you can just use it from the repo. The disadvantage is that sometimes the repo lags behind the main version. So you may not get the very latest bug fixes and security patches. You have to wait for someone to stick it into the repo, right? Or is anybody rolling their own repo? Yeah, OK. So that's also an option as well, and especially if you're doing kind of like DevOps style environment, or there's a lot of reasons where you would want to roll your own repo that has your specific things. So then you could use a package manager to go and get your to go and build it through repository. The last way, so we went from most flexible to kind of somewhat flexible, and the least flexible, although these days still very flexible, is to use a distribution that has a GUI. So I've got Asterisk now up on the slide. How many? There's lots of different distributions. How many folks have used Asterisk now? OK, a lot of folks. How about the free PBX distro? OK, we got a lot of folks. Schmooze guys are here. Say hi to those guys. How about Elastics? How many folks have used Elastics? OK, Elastics guys are here as well. Say hey to those guys. How about PBX and a Flash? Got a lot of PBX and a Flash guys out in the house too. And actually, Ward is hanging out and a lot of the PBX and a Flash crew. How about, is anybody using any other Asterisk distros besides those ones? Those are like the big ones, but I always like to ask. In any case, for those of you that are not familiar, the distro is going to take Linux, and in the case of Asterisk now, it's going to be CentOS Linux, or CentOS, however you want to pronounce it. It's going to take Linux. It's going to then install Asterisk, and with Asterisk now, it actually gives you a choice of whether you want GUI or no GUI. So I actually know a lot of people that use Asterisk now. In fact, I use it in this fashion where when I want to spin up VMs, I use the Asterisk Now ISO, and I just say, OK, I don't need the GUI. And it basically is a really speedy way for me to install Asterisk and not need to mess with compiling or anything like that. So that's a really nice way to use the distro. But most people, when they're using the distro, they're going to use it with the GUI. And that allows you to do GUI configuration of Asterisk. It's not going to be as full-featured as, say, a product. So you'll see a lot of vendors on the floor, or even you guys have probably built your own products of Asterisk, and you kind of know maybe they might use FreePBX at the core, the FreePBX GUI, or you've built extra functionality on top of that. So these days it gets more and more featured, and I know the Smoosh guys have cool stuff coming out. I know Elastic has cool stuff coming out. But the GUI basically allows you to do these kind of the main things of a PBX, install those in. So as I noticed earlier, we have a lot of folks in the room who have used Dialplan. Yeah.
I did have a question actually. I was curious. The Yum repositories, do they tend to have most of those dependencies already figured in, like the dependency for the motif?
OK. Yes. So the question was, do the repositories already have those dependencies resolved? And the answer is yes and no. So it depends on how the repository is configured, right? So that's one of the advantages or disadvantages of the repo, is that whoever built that repo decided to have a certain compilation profile for Asterisk that it's going to build these certain modules, and that's what you get when you download it from the repo. So when you compile from source, you get to specifically choose your profile that you want, or if you build your own repo, you can build that out. But if you just take the basic repo, it gets you most of the stuff, right? And then it's gonna do that dependency resolution. So it's kind of like any other dependency resolution. Like if you go to, you're on a new system and you wanna yum install like DHCPD or something, right? And then it just goes and does all that dependency resolution for you. That's kind of the advantage there, is that when you yum install Asterisk, if you're missing stuff and it's for the modules that have been added to that repo, then it's going to go ahead and resolve that for you through the package manager, right? That's kind of the advantage there of the yum install or the apt-get install. But that's a good question. Cool. Well, feel free to raise your hand or talk as we go along, and we will get into the crux here of, like I said, Dialplan scripting. So even if you've never done any development before, we'll take it step by step and show you what's going on. So for this, yeah.
What version is it we're talking about here?
So the version of Asterisk that I am running on my VM is version 11, but let me think here. Most of what I'm saying applies to like almost all versions of Asterisk, and I've been trying to call out if it's particular. So the question was, what version of Asterisk am I going to be talking about? And the answer is predominantly Asterisk 11, because that's our latest LTS release. But in most cases where there's differences between versions, I've been trying to make a note of that. And so you guys can keep me honest too. If you notice something and you say, oh, hey, this was different in some different version, pop that up and share with the group. So here we will want to understand just what the Dialplan is at a high level. We will talk about the extensions.conf syntax using context, extensions, priorities, and applications. We will talk about the end priority, priority labels, and the same designator, which I think has been around since 1.6.2. And what we'll do is we'll build a basic extension. So at a high level, the Asterisk Dialplan is unlike a Dialplan in a traditional PBX system. So in an old school legacy, hard iron PBX, your Dialplan was kind of like just a mapping. So you had extension 100 was going to ring this port, right? And this specific phone, like this phone is extension 100, right? That's the old way of thinking about it. In Asterisk, the Dialplan is not just a mapping, it's actually a scripting language. So it's not an interpreted language like Python or PHP or Perl. It's not a compiled language like C or C++. It's actually a parsed scripting language, right? And I actually don't know of other languages. If somebody knows of another scripting language that is actually parsed, I'd be interested in hearing about that use case. But what Asterisk does is, because of course extensions.conf started out as a configuration file and kind of evolved into its own scripting language. So Asterisk actually reads the configuration file and parses it, and that's how it gets that configuration. So in any case, because it's a scripting language, you can do logic and call flow and intelligence and a lot of programmatic things you can build in your Dialplan. It's very robust and a featureful way of approaching things rather than just a simple mapping. And as we'll learn, extensions are a whole nother thing. So think of it like the logic of the system. Think of it as a list of instructions. And the analogy I like to use if you're not familiar with programming at all is that programming is kind of like using a recipe, right? So you might have a recipe card, and you pull out the recipe card. And how are you going to follow that recipe? Well, you're going to follow it step by step. You're going to say, what's step 1? OK, let me do that. What's step 2? OK, let me do that. And that's exactly how programming language works. It says, let me follow this step, let me follow this step, let me follow this step. That's kind of how it is. There are some places where you can loop back around, but we'll get that to later on. So as we're understanding how the Dialplan works, the first thing that we want to make note of is Dialplan context. And think of a context as basically a bucket for extensions. Now, I'll talk more about, I haven't defined what extensions are yet, but if you kind of suspend disbelief for a moment and just assume we have these things called extensions, and it doesn't really matter what they do, but you're probably familiar at a minimum level that an extension would call a phone or would call into something, right? And so in this case, my extensions have been named by numbers because you typically dial them from a 10-digit keypad. And so here I've got like a bucket. And the way I define that in my conf file is using a bracketed section, as you guys have already seen today. And so when Asterisk is parsing line by line, hey, this line, this line, this line, when it gets to a bracketed section, that tells Asterisk, hey, create a bucket. And everything underneath it, start putting in that bucket until you get to another context definition. So to break it down, this would be, I just open up a blank file. Actually, this is really funny. This is like still there from the last time I did something. I just tried to open up a random name. And it's actually the exact thing. I must do this too much because it's like exactly what I wanted to do. So the point here is here's like a context, like context 1, and Asterisk defines that. And then it has like something, 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 something. And then it gets to the next context, and that says make a new bucket. And now here's this new bucket, and all of this stuff is in context 2. And it keeps doing that until it gets to here. So that's kind of how it works. It creates a bucket, and then everything underneath it, it puts in that bucket until it gets to another context definition. And the way the buckets work is they by default separate extensions, right? So this is the function of extension, or the function of context, is that they separate extensions. So the extensions over here, they just can't mix with the extensions over here. They've been feuding for a long time, and they've drank a lot of moonshine, and they just don't like each other. So what happens is here's the demo context, and here's the default context. And if I enter into the default context, and I say, give me 6,000, it's going to say, hey, I've got 6,000, here you go. If I say, give me 500, it's going to say, hey, I've got 500, here you go. If I'm in the default context and I say, give me 3,000, it's going to say, nope. No go. I do not have that, don't know what that is, right? So by default, they're separated. This is very nice for security reasons, right? Imagine that I had a context called in and a context called out. One is for calls that come into my system, and one is for calls that go out to my system. Can you imagine why you would want that logic separated, right? What would happen if calls that came into my system, if all of them were also in the system, right? Maybe out over my toll-bearing trunks, right? So you don't want this type of logic, and it's something to watch out for when you're configuring your dial plan. You do not want someone to be able to dial into your system and then have an access out. Sometimes that's a requested feature. They'll call it like DISA, or direct inward dialing access. And you typically tie that off with some type of passcode. Although these days, hacking DTMF codes is like milliseconds. So if a customer asks for the DISA, I wouldn't even give it to them. I would give them like a mobile phone app, or I would give them some other type of way to remotely access their system, because that's just an antiquated, kind of insecure mechanism. But in any case, we're illustrating the point here that context-separate extensions. The thing you'll also notice here is that I've got extension 500 and 500. And so you're saying if I go into the system, which one will it give me? Will it give me 500 or will it give me 500? Well, the answer is it will give me whichever context I'm in. So if I'm in the default context, I get 500 at default. If I'm in the demo context, I get 500 at demo. And those are two different extensions. They could do totally different things. 500 at demo could probably call some type of demo server and do some type of demonstration, whereas 500 at default maybe rings an endpoint or dials into an IVR, right? So they're completely unrelated, even though they're named the same thing. This you can imagine if you had some type of a multi-tenant situation, right? You might have a multi-tenant situation where CEO of company 1's phone is extension 100, and janitor of company B's extension is extension 100. And they can have the same name, and they're just off in separate contexts, and that's totally fine, right? So by default, context-separate extensions. And an extension, the full name for an extension is extension at context. So maybe I can show you guys some more bonus or fun here in Asterisk. So the way to look at your Dialplan in Asterisk after it's been parsed is to do a Dialplan show. And Dialplan show, just by itself, will get you everything. Dialplan show. But I can do a Dialplan show and tab complete, and it'll tell me what my contexts are. So here I have a context called IVR and a context called default, one called outbound, one called Fibonacci. You can imagine what that one does. So if I do Dialplan show IVR, it'll just show me that context, right? And that has extensions 1, 2, 3, and E. And I'll talk about IVRs later on this afternoon. Or let's look at my default context. So if I do Dialplan show default, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here. And notice that these extensions are not even named by numbers, right? They just, this one's called AGI min and AGI Peist, and I'll talk about extensions in a moment. But the point I just wanted to get at is, let me do this, extensions.conf, and let me go to internal phones, and let me do this, extend equals greater than 100, comma 1, no op. This is a test, okay? And so get that here, and then this one is, so if actually let's do it this way. So here in my internal phones context, I've got this extension 100 that I've created, and hopefully I don't have another 100. And then here's my default context, and at the bottom of my default context, I've also created this extension 100, right? So 100 now exists in both contexts. So if I do Dialplan show 100 at default, it tells me, hey, this is a test. And actually, this is terrible. Let me do this more legit, right? So this is in the default context. And let's do this one. This is in the internal phones context. We'll just save it like that. Dialplan reload. Dialplan show 100 default. So 100 default, hey, that's the one in the default context. 100 at internal underscore phones. 100 at internal underscore phones is the other one. And you can actually see that I've got a little bit of goofiness with the pattern match. And so let me actually talk about why this is happening. Actually, can anyone in the room surmise as to why this is happening? I mean, I haven't even covered this stuff before, but just to go on a little tangent. Why? So you guys saw me make this, and it was only one line. But here, it's got 3 lines of stuff. Does anybody know why that's happening? It's not from the same designator. It's actually from a pattern match. So what happens is it actually matches the pattern match. So I have a pattern match that has got multiple priorities. So if you're already a Dialplan scripter, I'm talking to you guys now. If you're not a Dialplan scripter, this will make sense by the end of the day. But if you're already a Dialplan scripter, I've got a pattern match that's like XXX, right? And so that'll match anything. That'll match 100. And it has multiple priorities. And so you can see those priorities are actually showing up as part of that extension. Just a little aside for you there. Now, this is cool. I don't know if you guys knew you could do this. If I do 100 and just at, it'll show me all of my contexts that have a 100 extension. So that's a nice little trick that sometimes you can be using Asterisk for a long time and not know that you can just do 100 at, and it'll show all of your contexts. But what happens if I just say Dialplan show 100? What's going to happen there? It's not going to show them both. It's going to fail, right? Because if I just do Dialplan show 100, although showing both was a good guess. So if I do 100 at, it'll show both. If I just do 100, it says there's no existence of the context. So if you just do Dialplan show and then a name, it's looking for a context. For example, like default. I'm going to say Dialplan show default. It'll show me that default context. But if I actually want to show an extension like 100, I need to do 100, and I need to specify that it's going to be in some context, either with just the at symbol by itself or with the full-on default. So now that I've talked a little bit about extensions, let me talk about a comment warning that has to deal with context. So going back to context, right? So Asterisk parses the .conf file from top to bottom, right? So what this means is it's going to read the line, read the line, read the line. Hey, did I get to a comment? Ignore that line. Read the line, read the line, read the line, read the line, right? So here we see, here's a context. Put these in the green context. So this is kind of illustrating that bucket principle I showed earlier. Now, what happens if I comment out the name of the yellow context? Well, all of these extensions are now in the green context, right? This box or this bucket's now been extended because Asterisk is ignoring this line due to the comment, right? As a result, I recommend do not comment out your context, right? You can either comment out the extensions in the context or comment out the whole thing. And if you guys remember the tip from earlier, you can go into extensions.conf and you can just go like that and just put comment out the whole thing, right? Drop them all the way down, comment out your whole stuff. In Vim, so I showed a little trick, and most of the guys were hanging out. If you ping me during the break, I'll show it to you, or ping your neighbor, and you can. Extensions. Extensions are a script that is going to execute. Okay, so a lot of times, especially if you come from a telephony background, it gets really, really hard to get out of your mind that this phone is an extension, because it's not. We talk about phones like they're extensions. We'll often say, oh, this is extension 600 and this is extension 600, right? But what if I've got a Digium phone that's got 6 accounts on it, and it's got 600, 700, 800, 900, and 1,000, right? Which one is the phone? It's none of them, right? Because that concept of an extension being the phone is a legacy concept. In the world of Asterisk, an extension is just a script that does something. So it could dial a phone, extension 100 could dial a phone, or it could call into an IVR. It could call into voicemail. It could execute a script to water your plants or have your plants call you or whatever, right? An extension is just a script that's going to execute. That's really the way to think about it. It's not an endpoint. And the way extensions work is that each extension is going to have a series of actions, right? So here inside the context, I've got an extension, and it's going to say action, 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 action. Each line is going to be one action. And each of those actions is what we call that is an application. It's going to execute a Dialplan application. And a Dialplan application is basically like a mini program that's already been written for you that has some type of functionality that's going to go do something. And at each line in that extension, each line of that script, you're basically saying, execute this program. OK, now execute this program. Now execute this program. If you guys are already developers, I will note that the Dialplan is it's non-asynchronous, so it's synchronous. The Dialplan does synchronous execution, and it blocks. So what that basically means is it executes each step one at a time. So if this step is taking a long time to get done, it's never going to go to the next one until that first one is done. That's how it works. The first one has to be finished, and it blocks until it goes to the next one, step by step, right? They can be alphanumeric names. So the syntax, the way you declare this is extend equals greater than the name of the extension, comma, priority, comma, and then that application that you want to execute. That's the syntax that you use when you're typing it out. So I can name an extension 1000. I could name it Tom. You saw I had some other named extensions in my dial plan because you can call these from anywhere, even from another dial plan extension. Or even if you have like a soft phone, you can actually dial by name instead of dialing by extension, right? And so in this case, Tom's extension here at priority 1 is going to execute the dial application. And it's going to dial a SIP device called the Digium phone or Digium-phone. And that assumes that I've created a SIP account in SIP.conf called Digium phone, right? Talking about asterisk priorities, a priority is basically a tag that tells each step when to execute, right? So you've got priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. They're going to execute in order. That's simple enough to understand. And again, each of those priorities is going to execute one application. So you would say, what are all the applications that are available to me? Well, you can do core show applications. So if I just look at first, I'm going to say, so extend equals greater than, right? So I can have an extension name. What should I name my extension? Complete silence. OK? Priority 1. And we're going to use a dial plan application. So at priority 1 is going to execute a dial plan application. And I want to know which one do I want to pick? Well, save that for a moment and go to asterisk. And I can do core show applications. This is going to give me a list of all my applications. Yay! Because I get lots of nice output. And of course, since I still have some verbosity set and things like that, I'll show you guys another trick. You guys may or may not know, if you are on the shell, so now I'm on the Linux shell, how do I execute a CLI command from the Linux shell? OK, so so -C will start asterisk in that shell, and rather than as a background process, and *-rx lets me execute a dial plan. So for example, core show applications. So that executes it and drops me back to the shell. This is really powerful because any information you can get out of the CLI, you can get to from a bash script, right? Or any type of shell script from Python or whatever you want to use. So from the shell, you can use Linux to access asterisk CLI commands. That's very powerful. In particular, the one use case that is very popular for that is a CLI command, logger rotate. Okay? So if you wanted to, say, rotate your logs, if you issue the CLI command, logger rotate, what that does is it closes the log file, it renames it, and then it opens up a new log file, right? So you can use logger rotate. Basically, you want to run that periodically so that you periodically are rotating your logs, and then you can do some other processing on them, right? But to run that command from asterisk, you can only run it from the CLI. So how do you get to it in your cron tab? And if you're not familiar with Linux, your cron is going to be like a script that runs every so often. You specify every Tuesday at midnight, run this script. And so every Tuesday at midnight, you use *-rx, and you get a nice little listing here. Now the next thing you can do is, of course, pipe that to less. And if you pipe that to less, you can now go through here and search for things, and that makes it really nice. So you could do that. And I'm trying to think if I have any output that will show in color. In any case, a trick, I do less-r. And so if you have like color enabled on your console, and you do less-r, it's going to interpret those color codes. So there's a little extra Linuxy tip for you. So in any case, here, for example, is ConfBridge, the ConfBridge application. And the ConfBridge application is going to use the conference bridge application. So let's do that. let's do extensions.conf. And this is going to use conf_bridge. And I haven't passed any parameters to it yet. I'm basically just illustrating I've got a Dialplan extension name, a priority, and an application. And in this case, the application is going to go out to the conf bridge. If I want to know what parameters I can pass to that application, I can do on the Asterisk CLI core show application conf bridge. Okay? And if I do core show application conf bridge, this tells me exactly what I need to pass. So first it shows me the syntax. And the syntax here is going to be conference. This is going to be the arguments here. This is going to be the name of a conference bridge. So let's do this real quick. 10, 10, 10. Maybe that's going to take a moment. So I can pass in the name of a conference bridge. So I could name it Bridge 555, or I could name it Bridge Joey, or whatever I want to call that bridge. And then I have some optional parameters. Okay? So the way to read this syntax, the way to read the syntax of the syntax, showing you the syntax. Yo, dog, you want some syntax with your syntax? The idea here is that these square brackets are saying optional parameters. So basically, the bridge profile is optional. It's not necessary. But the bridge, the conference name, is a required parameter, right? So this is kind of how to read this, what it's telling you to do. I have to pass it a conference name, but I can optionally give it like a bridge profile or user profile, that kind of a thing. So here in etsy asterisk and extensions.conf, I need to pass it a name, and I'll just call this one not an imaginative name for a conference at Astricon that this name is too long and monotone. OK, and that's my only required parameter. I only have one parameter that I need to pass. And that's the name of my conference. And I actually don't know how many characters you put into a conference name. Maybe I could break it. Somebody lab it up on their VM, and we can find out. So in any case, you can kind of see the syntax there. So I'm passing an application, pass certain things to applications. So there's a lot of different applications. So a lot of the, now you basically know it all. Now you can write almost anything in Dialplan. There's a few little things you can do here and there, but at a basic level, you've got a Dialplan extension, a priority, and an application. And the applications do all the work for you. I mean, a lot of it. So there's extra logic and things you can do, but a lot of Dialplan scripting is really familiarizing yourself with those applications that are available, right? So we'll hit in the talk today a lot of the most popular ones to kind of familiarize yourself. So in this case here, we're using playback and the playback application. This is really literally just going to play back an audio file. It's going to look for an audio file on the system that's in, I think it's var_lib or var_spool_sounds. And it's looking for a file called hello world. And I could have hello-world.gsm, hello-world.g711, or .eula, or .wave, or like a bunch of different files. And what the playback application will do is it will automatically do the least cost transcoding file. That's what I'll choose. So when I call this, it's going to play Allison Smith saying, let's see if I can get this. Welcome. Oh, that one says welcome. I didn't get hello world. So just for funds, 800, go to IVR, and then IVR, answer, playback. How about background? Hello, world. OK, since it's so fun.
Hello, world.
Oh, we love it. There it is. So, and I don't know if you noticed that the the other one that I had, whatever it said, like a welcome or something, I only had that like in GSM or some terrible format. But this is Allison Smith in all of her G722 glory.
Hello, world.
Oh man, it sounds so good. You can listen to that like 20 times because it's G722 wideband codec is awesome. And there's some really funny stuff in there that Allison does. I like TT Monty Nights is kind of funny, and if I have some time, I'll play some of that before lunch. In any case, multi-line extensions. So if I just want to do one thing, if I just want to go to a conference, hey, I can go to a conference. But what if I want to go to a conference, and then when I exit out of the conference, go to voicemail, and then when I exit out of voicemail, dial a phone, and then when it's kind of like a recipe. Like first, I want to put in the eggs, and then I want to beat the eggs, and then I want to put in some flour or whatever, right? So just like a recipe, we're going to follow step by step. The way you do that is by using multi-line extensions. And really, this is a syntax here, and I'll show you guys for guys that are used to writing Dialplan code like this. Some of us are used to like extend, like 5, 6, 7, and then 1, and then are actually like this. And you guys do it this way. So this might be priority 1, and actually I can do it like this, N, right? And so this is like app something that does something, right? And then you write your extensions like this, right? So how many people are kind of familiar with this style of syntax where you put the extension line every time? That's totally cool. That's totally a legitimate way of doing your dial plan. So the way it does it is, let's say no op just for funds, Z's, like that, right? So what this does is this says this is priority 1, and then N just says, hey, just give me the next thing, whatever it is. And the reason this is really nice is because if I want to put in another extension here, 5, 6, 7, 1, no op, something new, then I didn't have to relabel everything afterwards, right? Now, that's one way to do it, or this is kind of like the syntax I prefer, 7, 8, 9, kind of 1, and actually let's make this a legitimate extension so it doesn't fail. No op, nothing. Let's do this. No op, nothing. You'll notice my capitalization is not necessarily on par, but what you can do is same equals, actually, I like the Sean Ruffle style, same equals greater than N. So you could do it like this, or even like, no, it doesn't work. So I guess you could do it like that, and then no op, my goodness, I'm having trouble. Okay, so, and Dialplan reload. We are almost to lunch, so we've got about 10 minutes to go. All right, Dialplan show 5, 6, 7. Okay, so notice, what has it magically done? So if you remember, I used the N priority, right? I used that N priority label. And what it's done is it converted those into number priorities for me, right? Asterisk reads that and just added the next number. Same thing if I do 7, 8, 9. It just added those priorities. And you can see that either syntax is appropriate and works. You can either do where you explicitly say each line. I like this same one because, like, let's say I have extension, 5, 6, a bunch of 6s and a 5, and then a bunch, and then I just want to take all this logic. Bam, done, right? Because I use the same designator. So this way this works is this basically says, hey, everything under here, I'm going to interpret as 7, 8, 9 until I get to a new extension declaration, right? That's kind of how you use same. And so I like same because it kind of lets you recycle some logic there or a few lines of priorities. The real thing to do is if you're recycling logic is to use a go sub. And if I have time today, I'll get into go subs and using subroutines. So if you're doing a bunch of copy and pasting, don't do copy and pasting. Use a subroutine. But I'll show you guys that later today. But you might want to copy and paste a line or two or something like that, and you can use the same declaration. It works nice. Speaking of priority labels, okay, so the goto application. I said earlier, sometimes there's a way to do conditional logic or to do logic that loops. So maybe it says do step 1, do step 2, go back to step 1, right? So in this case, I can use the goto application. I can go to a specific place. In this case, I'm saying go to priority 2. And what it's going to do is going to continue to loop. It's going to go back here to priority 2, and then get here, go back to 2, then get here. So this is going to play back. And then it's going to play goodbye, 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 forever and ever and ever. So this is kind of where you want to send your buddy when you want to troll him. The other way to do that, though, instead of going to explicit priority, because what happens if I put in a new priority 2? Then it's priority 2 is something different, right? So instead, I can use a priority label. And so in this case, I've called it loop start, which is actually a type of analog signaling. So maybe it's not a great name for a priority, but it's the start of the loop, right? So this one behaves the same way. It says hello world and then plays a lot of goodbyes until they hang up or go insane. And here I'm just using a priority label to do that. So you could see that in specification where I could say something like this, where I could say this is something different. And here I can say my nifty label. And in reality, while I've got goofy labels and all that sort of thing, I would just encourage you to actually use descriptive. So mine are kind of goofy and sometimes emit a laugh or a groan. And mine are just for illustrative purposes, but this is a good tip if you've not done a lot of coding that you want to make it descriptive. So if it's the start of the loop, that's probably a good name. You could probably make it more descriptive, like what the loop is actually doing, right? So whatever your priority labels are, I wonder, calling it start, I guess, is kind of good, or begin. I've got some here, go back to the beginning of the thing. So anyway, the point is that when you're naming your extensions or naming your priority labels or whatever, anytime you have to come up with a name, the more descriptive you can make that, the better off you're going to be when you're going back through and you're trying to remember what your script actually does, right? So I think that gets us to the end. Do we have any questions on the script so far? Yeah. When I duplicate a priority. So you're saying if I explicitly number them and I duplicate them? OK, so the question is, what happens if I say extend equals greater than, we'll call this one, I got to come up with a new number. Oh, look at that. Yes, very good eye. OK, so does anyone want to venture a guess? So the question is, what happens? I've got 2 priority 1s. What is going to happen? So we've got a few. Who says that something new will be the one it uses? Who says that nothing will be the one it uses? Who says that it's going to fail and hork up altogether? OK, and who says something else completely different? Let's find out. This is exciting. I can hardly wait. Actually, we just saw it on that last screen. Look at this. OK, I'll reload Dialplan. Just get Dialplan reload and Dialplan show 567. What it actually used was nothing. So it actually did not, it ignored the second priority, right? So in this case, I thought that I had a priority there, and it completely disappeared from me. That could be a really important priority. That could call your AGI script that does all your magic. And if you fat finger, what's that? Possibly. Let's Dialplan reload, did I get some errors or warnings? Warning, unknown directive at line 51, ignoring. Okay? So I just happen to wonder. Extensions, 51. Ah, look at that. That's the aim directive. It didn't know what that was. So actually, well, look at this. This is a good little object lesson as we've got moments to lunch. When you're doing this, this is the way to do it. So if let's say you have an error, right? If you're doing this and you look at extensions.conf and you're like, oh man, I have an error in here. I got to look through it. And you're like looking through the code. You're never going to find it. Why? Because you're probably typing in front of a crowd of 100 people, and you're never going to type it in the first place. And 2, you missed it the first time. You're not going to see it again, right? So you want to use asterisk to your advantage. You want it to tell you what's going on. So the way to do that, actually, let's create an intentional error now. So let's have our aim directive, right? And and then no op, yep. And geez, okay. Asterisk, Dialplan reload, and actually let's just do that again. And so the Dialplan reload, if I look through the messages, it says warning, unknowing directive, aim at line 97, right? And so it's telling me exactly where the error is. I don't have to go hunt for it. I don't have to look through my code and try to figure out why the number I'm trying to dial is not doing what I told it to do. It's like right there in the messages. You want to use this to your advantage. You want to look through this and say, when I reload the dial plan, look at this. It even told me, unable to register extension 567 priority 1. It's already in use, right? So it took the first one, and then it tried to get a second one. And said, I can't do that second one. So when you do a dial plan reload, this is a best practice to look at your warnings and potentially error messages that arise and to resolve those, right?
Get that to spit out on like a text doc or something so you can actually read it?
Yes. Yes, so there's several ways to do that. So you could, for example, do *-rx, dial plan reload, pipe that, or no, we'll redirect our output to a new file. And then we'll just open up that new file. Bam! Oh. Boo. We could T asterisk. We could T asterisk. And, oh man, I forget I'd have to man T. Does everyone know the commands for if I T it? Pipe, yeah, so if I do *-rx, dial plan, reload, or wait, no, if I just do asterisk, if I do this, asterisk, pipe it to T, new file, .txt, and I do this, and I do dial plan, reload, and then we exit. Come on, big money, no whammies. And my buddy in the front who hooked me up. And you can see how it's all goofy here with all of this goofiness? This is what I was talking about earlier. If you do this with the new file and you pipe it to less-r, come on, work for me. Yes. So you see that less dash.
Would that be the log files too, though?
For the less-r?
It
It would be. This is an excellent point. So let me think about this. If you do, is the output verbosity from a dial plan reload show up in your logs? Who says yes? Okay, we have a brave soul. I actually don't know that. I know that verbose logs will show like your dial plan verbosity when it's executing. I don't know that it will actually show you your messages. It will show you your warnings though, right? So brave soul was correct. If I had like candy, I would throw it over there now, and you win like a candy and pretend cookies. You guys should let him go in line first because he knew the answer. Actually, this is true. So not the full output, but the warnings will show up in my log file because you can specify warnings, errors, and messages. And those warnings, errors, and messages are in the log file. And so if we cd to var log asterisk, we can see that I have a full log and a messages log. And if I look at my messages log and get down to the end, look at that. There are my warnings that are showing up. So they could be in the log file. So depending on what you want to do, in this case, if I just wanted to see the warning, it's in the log file. If I wanted to do my other thing, I can start asterisk. So this is a cool Linuxy trick, right? This is all awesome because asterisk, this is why someone was asking me, hey, why would I want to run asterisk on Linux? Because you can do this cool stuff, right? You could, but there's no reason to not run it on, say, Mac OS X or any Unix platform that you have your tools there, right? Whatever you want to do. But in this case, I'm running asterisk. I pipe it to T. Whatever I do in asterisk gets put in the file. That's very nice and helpful. And then when I want to read the file, I can use --r. So with that, I believe it is time for lunch. And I will let you guys go ahead first. And if you guys have a few questions, I'll hang out for like 10 minutes before I go to lunch. If you guys want to pop up and do an off-the-book question. But otherwise, have fun, guys.